Next, from Springfield, we attend the National Convention of Political Button Collectors and talk to button collecting enthusiasts and manufacturers. This runs about 15 minutes.
MITCH KUHN, thanks for joining us on the Illinois channel. We're at a National Convention of Button Collectors. What are you doing here?
Well, I'm a button collector myself, but I'm also a dealer and a manufacturer. And I got the current buttons for 2020 for president, and also antis for everybody, you might say. And it's the business is nonpartisan. I mean, my business is, and I'll make buttons for almost anyone. And I mean almost anyone. There is a line that I do have, but my business is nonpartisan. Now, as a collector being here, I collect various things in various areas of politics. I've worked in politics my whole life at various times in both parties. And
well, let me ask, as we are at this convention here where people are displaying primarily buttons, although there's also posters and some other collectibles, I suppose in general it's really a political collectors convention. What's the attraction? Why do people have these collections?
Well, it's a fascination with history because you're actually holding items and displaying items that were important in our history. There's Abraham Lincoln stuff and items, and items for politics in a sense goes back to George Washington's first inauguration, where there was clothing buttons made just for that out of brass and silver. And since then, there's been items constantly being manufactured, plates and pitchers and mugs and things like that in the early part of the 18th century.
The buttons that you are selling and others are selling, when did the campaign button come into play?
The campaign button as we know it now was patented in 1894, so the first presidential run was 1896 with McKinley and Bryan. And it's been a part of American life ever since.
When you hear in baseball collectors, there's the holy grail of certain collections. Is there correspondingly a holy grail button collection?
Oh yes, definitely. It's called a Cox Roosevelt button, made in 1920, and Roosevelt, and that's Franklin Roosevelt, was running for vice president with Cox. And that's one of the most rarest items out there, and everyone would love to own one. And the last, I think it went in an auction for $60,000 to $70,000. So there are items that everyone would love to find. And I had a friend that bought one of those, and I actually held it in my hand for a while, and it was like, ooh, wow, But it's always fascinating because, like that piece, to hold it in your hand, and the rarity of it, and the history of it. Those were samples that were sent to the Roosevelts, and the Roosevelts gave them out to their neighbors at Hyde Park and wherever they went, God only knows after that. But, so there's all these connections. I've been very, very fortunate to have met many presidents and governors and senators, and I've made buttons for some of them too, And
so is button making for campaigns, is that still, it seems to be still a thing because I'm standing here looking at the buttons that you have here of recent campaigns.
Every 2 or 3 years you always hear, buttons are a thing of the past. My business has done nothing but grow and grow and grow. And the other button manufacturers too. I have one extra advantage is because I can design them too. I actually have a graphics background, and so I could marry everything into one thing. And but campaign buttons will always be with us.
Now you're selling, and I guess you're representative of a lot of people here, but you're selling buttons that are fairly new, at least to what I'm looking at. Maybe you have some older ones as well, but you're selling here, we got Well, you have actually buttons for Trump 2020, so even on a future campaign.
And possible other candidates, for
I mean, you have all
2020.
kinds. But in other words, these are not just necessarily the real old and rare buttons. These are current buttons, and yet so people will come and just buy even current buttons.
Correct, because it's part of our history coming up, you might say, and everyone wants to get the newest thing possible. It's true in almost any hobby, and that niche I fill with other people. I'm not the only one, but I also have customers all over the country that want them. And so I wholesale to them.
Are the buttons that people come out and want to add to a collection, are they always of the national campaigns, or is there, as a sidebar, an interest in some guy who ran for governor of Iowa or Arkansas?
I myself, I collect Jimmy Carter buttons, and I also collect Chicago mayors, and Senator Dirksen from Illinois here, who I recall as a kid here. And
I suppose someone like Bill Clinton, who obviously became the president, or a Barack Obama who became a president.
Right.
Am I correct to say that if you had a campaign button from one of their earlier campaigns when Bill Clinton was running for Attorney General of Arkansas or something like that?
Congress, or the other races that he ran for. And and Obama's a good example there. When he ran for the state house, and then he had a race for Congress, which he lost. And then anything from those campaigns, those early campaigns, not only for Obama or for Clinton, but John F. Kennedy, you go back, FDR, the early campaigns that they were in, because there wasn't much made, be it posters or be it buttons or brochures even. And those are almost, if you're collecting Jimmy Carter, you want to get stuff from his governor's race, and I even got something from when he first ran for the school board in Plains, and that's very rare. And also the state Senate in Georgia, and so it's and to find those objects and to find them and put them in your collection. And a lot of us who collect this stuff, we really feel that we don't own it. We're just taking care of it. And we'll pass it down to other collectors in the future, And it almost has a life of its own, actually.
When you mention Jimmy Carter, some of us might remember his brother Billy, and there was Billy beer. Is this all, the collection items here, going to be tied directly to the campaigns, or would there be like Billy beer cans?
You can probably find some Billy beer cans here. I happen to collect Billy Carter stuff too, and because it's related to Carter, not only his brothers but just his items, and it's a fascinating history and fascinating personalities. One thing that I do collect, I recall, is in my teens, was we had a Secretary of State here in Illinois, Paul Powell, and he died suddenly, had no family. State police go into his house here in Springfield, find $3 million in cash and shoe boxes in his closet. And it took an instant of a second for everyone in the state to realize when they made their check out for their license plate every year, it was to Paul Powell, not Secretary of State or the state of Illinois, which it probably is now because of this, but to Paul Powell. And he obviously was cashing certain percentage of them every time. And great story, And so I collect Paul Powell items. There's not much out there, but I probably have the world's largest Paul Powell collection. And believe me, it's not a major collection, But I just have to, because I recall that, and I thought it was funny, And so, even my roots here in Illinois are deep. Wherever I've lived in Michigan, Wisconsin, I've collected things from those states too, And, but anyway, yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for going.
Very good. Thank you.
Tony Leone, you are the owner of the Pasfield House and former clerk of the Illinois House. You're here at this collection of, I guess it would be called political paraphernalia. It's buttons, posters, What's the attraction for people coming here, and how long have you been a collector of items?
Well, it's political items collectors, and I guess I've got my full political geek on today. This is wonderful. I'm meeting wonderful people. I gathered a whole large collection of stuff I had rat-holed over the years and showed it at UIS. They called it Harvest History, and it's even on their website. And this group reached out to me because they must have saw it and invited me to come. And I had no idea there was such a community here. I'm running into even former state legislators, old friends. They've bought buttons from me. I'm really here to sell instead of collect, though if I find some Lincoln stuff, I may pass on the money that I'm raising here from my button collection. Most of mine are Republican, but I have a mix, and over the years I can recall friends giving me their button collections because they didn't want to hang out with them anymore, but I've been the benefactor of those too.
And one of the things that you had shown me just earlier, that you have actually some like campaign buttons or pennies from Abraham Lincoln's 1860 and 1864 campaigns.
They're fantastic. They're copper. They're the size of a penny. And what gentlemen would do is they'd have these molded copper coins. One was a duratype of Lincoln and Hamlin, his first running mate, and the other is full copper of Lincoln and Johnson. There's a pinhole in the top, and gentlemen would wear them off their pocket watch chains, and that's how you knew these distinguished gentlemen were for Lincoln or not.
I would imagine those buttons are fairly rare. Where would you find something like that?
Well, I picked them up at a Republican National Convention years ago, and I can't even remember what I paid for them. I've been offered several $100s for each of them while I'm here, but they're keepsakes. I'm not going to offer them for any price.
Aside from those, are there other things that you have that are particularly of interest?
Well, somebody just bought my Tony Leone for county clerk button, which broke my heart. I hope I have another one, but I don't know. And then when George Ryan was running as speaker, you mentioned that I was clerk of the House. It was really cute. I was just a young pup. And George wore a button that said, "Elect Leone House Clerk," and then I wore a button that said, "Elect Ryan Speaker," and that was very cherished. I know I've got extras of those, thank God.
There's obviously a lot of passion in politics, and for those who have spent time in careers in politics or have worked in campaigns, I guess the thing is, on one hand, it probably to see these buttons captures a period of time when we were passionate about John F. Kennedy or Eisenhower or whoever it might be, right?
I was in politics on a full-time basis. I held some political positions that were administrative, but I also had a company called Campaign Reporting Systems. We did the books for Governor Ryan, did them for Governor Edgar. I was the assistant treasurer of the Republican Party of Illinois and did their books. I had a software system we developed that legislators all up and down the aisle were using them to manage their campaign financing records. So I was in it real big time. I think the first Republican National Convention was Dallas. No, it was Detroit. And then the last one was Philadelphia, and I don't have it here today, but I'm going to bring it tomorrow. I was given the standard. You know how those standards sit at the convention? They're really cool. They're kind of triangular, and it's signed by the whole delegation. I'm hoping somebody will really find that wonderful.
Well, thanks for joining.
Okay.
You're watching the Illinois Channel. an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.